What Moreau was doing with his cruel science was a warning to us what could go wrong if we twisted science to these kinds of evil ends. However, most of my critics didn't get it. And I must admit, this, as a young author, made me wonder. Now, it sold very well, and so I went on writing more of these scientific romances. I wrote one called The War of the Worlds. I imagine many of you have heard of it here in America, right? How many have read The War of the Worlds? Well, how many have heard Orson Welles' radio broadcast of the Orson? Ha! Ha! Tell you, I telegrammed him right afterwards, and I said, "You took unwarranted liberties with my tale." I threatened to sue him. Now, he had paid a contract to use and adapt it for the radio, and finally the solicitor said, no, we shouldn't sue, so we did not pursue it. But I must say, in addition to being upset with what he had done by changing things in my tale, I was appalled that you Americans were taken in by it. It was a long time before that, in 1905, that I made my first trip here to America. I had come wanting to see this new nation, for I had heard stories of progressive energy, and I was not disappointed. I published for Harper's Magazine a series of articles. Back in the next year, 1906, I published it as a book, The Future in America, because I thought I was indeed seeing the future. Good and bad. But the most amazing encounter for me was with your president, Theodore Roosevelt. And I used it as the final chapter in my book. You see, I had gone to visit several of the great cities, New York, obviously we had come in there, harbored there, landed there, the Statue of Liberty, the great skyscrapers, the enormous bustle and energy of that city overwhelmed me. What extraordinary things these Americans could do. Then I went out to visit Chicago. Well, I felt like in some ways I was back on the island of Doro with those abattoirs full of slaughter and the dirty, filthy, the kind of thing that new young writer Upton Sinclair was writing about. I agreed with him. It was appalling. I hope the state of Illinois soon passed regulations. But still I was impressed with the energy that I found in that great American city too. It should not surprise you, Washington. I was expecting to find the intellectual center of this new nation. Now, I had been to Harvard and Boston. I was extremely impressed with that, but it seemed a little pastward looking, and I thought, surely when we come to the political heart, I will find there the scientists, the Smithsonian Institute, kind of people Alexander Graham Bell was talking about. I would find there them involved in great discussions. I expected to find in Washington the American mind fully expressed in the most vigorous thought about the future. I did not. Instead, I found a people that seemed only interested in the most limited social and political matters of what senator was doing this. It all seemed so arcane to me, so small-minded in its political and social concerns, until I met President Roosevelt. Now, there was a man who was a thinker. What a lively mind for the president. He had read widely. He was writing widely. I had read some of his things, and we had a wonderful conversation in the White House. As the afternoon wore on, we explored all sorts of problems in America and beyond in the world, and considered the ideas and the strategies and the plans that might make it a world that was better for our species. Science that would be harnessed to a technological future of the greatest success. Then I was fascinated as we came to the end of the day that he wished to talk about my little tale, The Time Machine. He had read it and was fascinated with it. And so we discussed it, and he wondered about my picture of the Morlocks and the Eloi. And as the discussion came to its conclusion and it was time for me to depart, this is what your president said. He became gesticulatory, and his straining voice a note higher in denying this as a credible interpretation of destiny. With one of those sudden movements of his, he knelt forward in the garden chair. We were standing before our parting beneath the colonnade, and addressed me very earnestly over the back, clutching, and then thrusting out his familiar gesture, a hand first partly open and then closed. Suppose, after all, he said slowly, that should prove to be right, and that it all ends in your butterflies and Morlocks. That doesn't matter now. The effort's real. It's worth going on with. It's worth it. It's worth even then. I can see him now and hear his unmusical voice saying, the effort's worth it. And see that gesture of his clenched fist, and the, how can I describe it, the friendly, peering snarl of his face like a man with the sun in his eyes. He sticks in my mind as that, as the very symbol of the creative will in man, in its limitations, its doubtful adequacy, its valiant persistence amidst perplexities and confusions. He kneels out assertively against his setting, and his setting is the White House with a background of all America.